The chamber was massive, carved from crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Marcus Chen stood before the Galactic Council, his hands clasped behind his back, trying not to show his nervousness above him. 12 alien beings sat on elevated platforms, each representing a different species from across the known galaxy. The head counselor, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish made of golden light, spoke in a voice that echoed through translation devices. Your species seeks membership in the Galactic Federation, the counselor said. Yet you have shown us nothing that proves your worth. Ambassador Rodriguez, Marcus's boss, stepped forward. Honored Council, humanity has much to offer, she began. We have art, science, philosophy. So do bacteria, interrupted a council member who resembled a crystalline spider. They also exist and replicate. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Another council member, this one covered in silver scales, leaned forward. Humans are soft, it said. You cannot survive without your machines, your climate control, your processed foods. You are children playing with dangerous toys, added another voice. Ambassador Rodriguez's face flushed red, but she maintained her composure. If the council doubts our capabilities, perhaps we could demonstrate. Demonstrate? The Golden Counselor interrupted. How? By showing us another slideshow of your short history? More laughter. Marcus couldn't take it anymore. I'll take the trial, he said loudly. The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Rodriguez turned to him, eyes wide. Marcus, no, she whispered. You don't have to. I volunteer for the species trial, Marcus repeated, louder this time. Looking directly at the council, the Golden Counselor seemed to shimmer with interest. You? A junior aide? Not even your ambassador? I'm human, Marcus said simply. That's qualification enough. The crystalline spider leaned back. Bold words for such a fragile species, it said. Do you even know what the trial entails? Marcus had read about it. Of course, every species that joined the Federation had to prove themselves in survival. Trial 30 days on a hostile world with only one item of their choosing. The survival rate was about 60%. I know the rules, Marcus said. 30 days, one item. No rescue unless I activate the emergency beacon, which would mean automatic failure, the silver scale being added, and shame for your entire species. I won't need the beacon, Marcus replied. The council members exchanged glances. Their various forms of communication, creating a wave of colors and sounds that the translation devices couldn't quite capture. Finally, the Golden Counselor spoke. Very well, it said. We accept your challenge. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing a rotating image of a moon. This is designation K773, the counselor explained. A Class 4 hostile environment. Marcus studied the display carefully. The moon was mostly rocky, with sparse vegetation and dangerous weather patterns. Temperature swings from freezing nights to scorching days. Occasional rainstorms that could turn deadly, and according to the data streaming across the screen, at least 3 species of predatory fauna. Previous challengers have chosen wisely, the crystalline spider said, its voice dripping with condescension. Plasma blades, environmental shields, matter replicators. Images appeared showing various aliens with their chosen items. One had survived with a portable shelter generator, another with a multi-tool that could do almost anything, a third with a weapon that could kill from a kilometer away. What will you choose, human? The Golden Counselor asked Marcus. Had been thinking about this from the moment he volunteered it. Grown up camping with his grandfather in the Colorado mountains. Old school camping, the kind where you brought almost nothing and built everything else. His grandfather had been a Marine. Then a survival instructor taught Marcus that the best tool wasn't the most advanced. It was the most versatile. I'll need to see the exact environmental parameters, Marcus said. The council looked surprised. But data began flowing faster across the holographic display gravity. Point 8. Earth, standard atmosphere. Breathable but thin water sources. 3 major streams. Seasonal rainfall flora. Minimal, some edible species. Mostly scrub brush fauna. Multiple species. Including 1 apex predator. Temperature range. -20 to +45 Celsius. Marcus nodded slowly. Calculating. I'll take 200 meters of paracord, he said finally. The chamber erupted not with laughter this time, but with confused chattering and bewildered exclamations. Cord? The silver-scaled being said, You mean rope? Paracord specifically, Marcus clarified. 7-strand. Rated for 250 kilograms. The golden counselor's glow dimmed slightly. Forgive me. But I must ask, it said, are you being intentionally foolish? Or do you simply not understand the challenge? I understand perfectly, Marcus replied. Rope? The crystalline spider repeated. Not a weapon? Not a shelter? Not even a blade? Just the cord, Marcus confirmed. Ambassador Rodriguez grabbed his arm. Marcus, please reconsider, she whispered urgently. Choose something practical. But Marcus was thinking about all the things his grandfather had taught him. How to make fire with friction. How to build shelter from natural materials. How to trap. How to fish. How to survive with almost nothing. And how the most important survival tool wasn't something you carried. It was something you knew. The trial begins at dawn, the Golden Counselor announced. Clearly thinking this human was doomed. You will have 1 cycle to prepare. I'm ready now, Marcus said. The council seemed taken aback. Your confidence is admirable, the silver-scaled being said. Or perhaps suicidal. We shall see, the Golden Counselor declared. Prepared the transport. 6 hours later, Marcus stood in a small preparation chamber. A single coil of green paracord lay on the table before him. He picked it up, feeling its weight, testing its strength. 200 meters, about 650 feet. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. Give me enough rope and a working brain, and I can survive anywhere. An alien attendant entered, checking readouts. The transport is ready, it said, its tone almost pitying. Are you certain about your choice? You can still select a different item. I'm certain, Marcus said, coiling the cord carefully and slinging it over his shoulder. The attendant led him to the transport ship through the windows. He could see the moon K773 growing larger, barren, rocky. Unforgiving, the council members' faces appeared on screens around him. Any last words before we begin? The Golden Counselor asked. Marcus looked at the camera. See you in 30 days, he said. The crystalline spider made a sound that might have been a sigh. This is the most foolish choice in the history of the trial, it announced. I predict failure within 10 days. I give him 5. Another council member said. Only one voice dissented, an elderly alien that looked like a tree made of flowing water. Perhaps, it said softly, we do not understand humans as well as we think. The transport shuddered as it entered the moon's atmosphere. Marcus tightened his grip on the cord and watched the surface rushing up to meet him. The transport landed with a heavy thud, and the door hissed open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of dust and something organic he couldn't identify. You have 30 days, the transport pilot said. The emergency beacon is embedded in your left palm. Press and hold for 5 seconds if you need extraction. Marcus stepped out onto the rocky surface. The transport door closed behind him. Engines roared, and the ship lifted off. Leaving him completely alone, he stood on a cliff edge, wind howling around him, watching the transport disappear into the purple-gray sky. The monitoring drones were up there somewhere, watching, broadcasting his every move to the council. They expected him to fail, expected him to panic, to struggle, to eventually press that beacon and admit defeat. Marcus looked down at the coiled cord in his hands. Then he smiled. "All right, Grandpa," he whispered to the wind. "Let's show them what humans can do." He began walking down the cliff face. Already planning, already adapting, already surviving. The trial had begun. The first night nearly killed him. Marcus had underestimated how cold the moon would get after sunset. Found a small alcove in the rocks before darkness fell. But the temperature dropped so fast that his breath turned to ice crystals in the air. He spent hours shivering, hugging himself, trying to preserve body heat when dawn finally came, pale and thin. He was exhausted. Day 1 complete, he muttered through chattering teeth. 29 to go. High above, invisible, but always present. The monitoring drones recorded everything in the council chambers. Several members watched with mild interest. He survived the first night, the crystalline spider observed. "Barely. Give him time," another replied. "The cold will break him." But Marcus wasn't thinking about breaking. He was thinking about fire. His grandfather's voice came back to him. Friction, tinder. Patience. Marcus spent the morning gathering materials. He found a flat piece of wood from a dead bush and a straight stick using individual strands from the paracord. He created a bow drill. The cord became the bowstring, wrapped around a spindle that would rotate against the flat board. His hands were clumsy at first, muscles stiff from the cold night, but slowly, carefully, he began to work back and forth. Back and forth, the stick spun, friction built, and smoke began to rise. "Is he trying to make fire?" a council member asked, zooming in the monitoring feed. "Impossible," the silver scale being said. Not with such primitive methods, but 30 minutes later, Marcus had a small ember had prepared a bird's nest of dry grass and shredded bark. He transferred the ember carefully, blowing gently, nursing it like a newborn, then flame small at first. But growing. Marcus laughed, a sound of pure triumph that echoed across the barren landscape. "Fire!" he shouted to no one. "Day 2, and I've got fire." The council chamber fell silent. The elderly tree-like alien made a sound that might have been approval. Marcus spent the rest of day 2 improving his situation. He built a proper fire pit using rocks, found a water source, a stream about half a kilometer from his alcove, used more cord to create a carrying system for firewood, but he needed food. The cold and exertion were burning calories faster than he'd anticipated on day 3. Marcus focused on hunting. He studied the terrain, looking for game trails. Small creatures left tracks in the dust, something like rabbits. But with 6 legs using the paracord, he created snares, simple loops placed along the trails, held open by carefully balanced sticks. It was tedious work, and he failed many times. But his grandfather had taught him patience. "You can't rush nature," the old man used to say. "You work with it, not against it." By evening of day 3, Marcus had caught his first prey, a small creature, fur-covered, protein-rich, cleaned it using a sharp rock, cooked it over his fire. It was the best meal he'd ever tasted. The human has achieved basic survival, the Golden Counselor announced to the assembled council. Fire, water, shelter, food, but nothing impressive, the crystalline spider added. Any reasonably intelligent species could do this. True, another agreed. Let's wait and see if he can maintain it. Day 4 brought new challenges. Marcus woke to find rain clouds gathering. The temperature dropped, and by afternoon, cold rain was falling. Steadily, his fire sputtered and died despite his best efforts to protect it. But the rain also brought opportunity. Marcus used the cord to create a water collection system. He suspended his shirt between 2 rocks using cord, creating a funnel that directed rainwater into a natural depression in the stone. By evening, he had collected several liters of fresh water. He also realized he needed better shelter. The alcove protected him from wind, but rain came in at an angle using the paracord and fallen branches. He created a primitive lean-toy. It wasn't pretty, but it kept him dry day 5. Marcus made his first composite tool, head. Found a flexible branch that had the right spring to it using cord and careful technique. He created a bow knot for fire starting this time. But for hunting, he made arrows from straight sticks, using cord to attach sharp stone points. The fletching came from feathers he'd collected from bird-like creatures. His first attempts at shooting were embarrassing. The arrows flew wild, landing nowhere near their targets, but Marcus practiced hour after hour, until his arms ached. He's making weapons, a young council observer noted with interest. Crude ones, the silver scale being dismissed, barely functional. But by day 6, Marcus had improved enough to bring down a larger prey animal, something that looked like a mix between a deer and a lizard. Provided enough meat for several days. He used more cord to hang the meat high in a tree. Keeping it away from scavengers, day 7 brought a significant discovery. While exploring further from his camp, Marcus found the tracks, large, deep impressions in the soft soil near the stream's 6 toes, each tipped with what must be massive claws. The apex predator the data files had mentioned. Marcus studied the tracks carefully. His heart pounding. The creature was big, probably twice his size, and definitely dangerous. He followed the tracks cautiously, learning its patterns, where it hunted, where it drank. Where it seemed to den knowledge was survival. His grandfather had taught him that too. Never ignore a threat, the old man would say. But don't obsess over it either. Just understand it. By day 8, Marcus had established a routine: wake at dawn, rebuild the fire, check his snares, hunt if needed, gather materials, improve his camp. Sleep. The council observers were less dismissive. Now they watched with growing curiosity as this human adapted and thrived. He's surprisingly resourceful, one admitted, for a species we deemed soft, the elderly tree being added pointedly. The 9 brought another innovation. Marcus realized his feet were getting torn up from walking on the rocky terrain his shoes had worn 2 days ago. Using cord and flexible bark, he created primitive sandals. He wrapped the cord around his feet in complex patterns, creating cushioning and protection. It took him most of the morning to get the technique right, but the relief was immediate. He's making footwear, the crystalline spider observed. From rope, the cord has more uses than we anticipated, the golden counselor said thoughtfully. Day 10 was significant for another reason. Marcus created a fishing net, been catching individual fish using a sharpened stick, but it was inefficient by weaving cord in a grid pattern. He made a small net. He placed it in the stream, weighted down with rocks, and by evening had caught a dozen fish-like creatures. That's actually clever, a council member admitted reluctantly. On day 11, Marcus improved his shelter significantly, using cord to lash branches together. He created a more stable structured lashing technique was complex figure 8 patterns that distributed stress evenly. It was engineering. Even if primitive, the shelter could now withstand stronger winds. Day 12 brought medical necessity. Marcus slipped while climbing rocks near his camp, gashing his leg on a sharp edge. Blood flowed freely, and for the first time, he felt genuine fear. He couldn't afford an infection out here, using the cleanest water he had. He washed the wound, then, carefully unraveling a section of paracord into its 7 individual strands. He created makeshift sutures. The pain was intense as he stitched his own leg, but his hands stayed steady. He's performing field medicine, a council observer said, impressed despite themselves. With rope, those inner strands are quite fine, another noted. Strong enough to hold tissue. Days 13 and 14 were spent recovering. Marcus couldn't hunt as actively, so he relied on his snares and fishing net. He used the time to improve his camp further. He created a pulley system, using cord and a sturdy branch. Now he could haul heavy loads up to his shelter more easily. He also made a primitive backpack by weaving cord through a piece of bark. It allowed him to carry more supplies when he explored. Day 15 started like any other, but by midday, Marcus noticed the sky changing. The clouds were different, darker, moving faster. The wind picked up, carrying a strange metallic smell. He checked the paracord calendar. He'd been keeping knots tied at regular intervals to count days. 15 down, 15 to go. Halfway, the wind grew stronger, howling through the rocks. Marcus looked at his shelter, suddenly worried. This wasn't normal weather. This was something much worse. In the council chambers, alarms began sounding. Storm system detected, a technician announced. Category equivalent to your Terran hurricanes. How strong? The Golden Counselor asked. Winds exceeding 200 kilometers per hour, came the reply. The worst system this moon has seen in decades. The council members looked at each other. The human should trigger his beacon. The silver scale being said, he cannot survive this. We should offer extraction. Another agreed, but the elderly tree being held up a limb-like appendage. Wait, it said. Let's see what he does. On the surface, Marcus stood outside his shelter, wind whipping his hair. He looked at the darkening sky, then at his shelter, then at the coiled cord. He still had left 40 meters. Maybe 50, not much, but enough, all right, he said to himself. Time to build something that'll last. He began to work. Racing against the approaching storm, the council watched in silence as this human, this supposedly soft and weak species, prepared to face nature's fury with nothing but cord, determination, and the knowledge passed down from an old man who'd taught his grandson that survival wasn't about having everything, it was about using anything. Marcus worked through the afternoon as the sky grew darker and more threatening. The wind already felt strong enough to knock him over. And according to his observations, this was just the beginning. He took apart sections of his existing shelter. Keeping only the strongest parts, the alcove in the rocks would provide basic protection. But he needed more using the remaining paracord. He created something his grandfather had shown him years ago, a tensile lashing system first. He found the strongest anchor points in the rock face, natural holes and crevices where he could secure cord. He ran multiple lines from these anchors, creating a web-like structure. Each line was secured with proper knots, bow lines, clove hitches, trucker's hitches, knots his grandfather had made him practice until he could tie them blindfolded. A knot isn't just rope tied to itself, the old man had said. It's geometry, it's physics, it's the difference between life and death. Marcus gathered every sturdy branch he could find using the cord. He lashed them together in triangular patterns. Triangles were strong. They distributed force evenly. He worked faster as the first drops of rain began to fall. The shelter he was building wasn't beautiful, but it was engineered. Each lashing had a purpose. Each cord line carefully tensioned. He created a framework that was flexible enough to bend in the wind, but strong enough not to break. Rain intensified. Marcus secured his supplies, the dried meat, his fire-starting tools, everything essential. He made sure the cord securing each item could withstand serious stress. His hands were raw now. Rope burned and bleeding, but he didn't stop. Thunder cracked across the sky, so loud it seemed to shake the ground in the council chambers. The technicians provided updates. Storm making landfall at the humans' location in 1 hour. 1. Announced wind speeds already exceeding 150 kilometers per hour. The crystalline spider shook its head. He should have activated the beacon hours ago, it said. This is foolish bravery, not intelligence. Or perhaps, the elderly tree being replied, he knows something we don't. On the moon's surface, the storm hit with devastating force. Marcus had just finished the last securing line when the full power of the wind struck it. Felt like being punched by an invisible giant train. Came down so hard it was almost solid, turning the world into a blur of gray and violence. Marcus retreated into his reinforced shelter. The cord lines he'd created screamed in the wind, stretching and flexing, but they held. The triangular framework of branches groaned and shifted, but it held. Marcus sat in the center, water dripping everywhere. Checking each anchor point, he could feel the shelter moving, responding to each gust like a living thing. When one section seemed about to fail, he grabbed cord and re-tensioned it. The storm raged for hours. Thunder and lightning turned night into a throbbing nightmare several times. Marcus heard cracking sounds that made his heart race. Once a section of his framework did collapse. He scrambled in the dark and rain, hands finding cord by memory, retying, reinforcing. His muscles screamed with exhaustion. His clothes were soaked through, and the cold was seeping into his bones. But he kept working in the council chambers. No one spoke. They watched the monitoring feeds in silence. The feed showed almost nothing, just darkness, rain, and occasional glimpses of a human shape moving frantically. His shelter is failing. The silver scale being finally said, "No." The elderly tree being corrected, "It's adapting." He's adapting around hour 5 of the storm. Something unexpected happened through the rain and darkness. Marcus heard a different sound, a roar that wasn't thunder. The apex predator. Marcus froze. Peering into the darkness, 2 large eyes reflected what little light there was. The creature was massive, easily 3 meters long. With those 6 powerful legs and a mouth full of teeth, it had sought shelter in the same alcove. They stared at each other through the storm. Marcus's heart hammered. He had no weapon ready, no way to defend himself effectively. The creature took a step closer. Marcus could smell it now, wet fur and something musky, but it didn't attack. It was scared. He realized scared of the storm, just like any animal would be. Slowly, carefully, Marcus moved to one side of his shelter-making space. "There's room enough for both of us," he said quietly, knowing it couldn't understand. "Truce for tonight?" The creature hesitated, then moved into the shelter and settled on the opposite side, as far from Marcus as possible. They spent the rest of the storm like that, predator and prey, both just trying to survive, both knowing that out here, nature was the real enemy. The council observers were stunned. "Is he sharing shelter with the apex predator?" One asked in disbelief. "They're not fighting." Another observed. "Fascinating." The golden counselor murmured. Dawn came slowly, gray and exhausted. The storm had passed, but it had left destruction in its wake. Marcus crawled out of his shelter, legs shaky. The creature followed, looked at him once with those alien eyes, then bounded away across the rocks. "You're welcome," Marcus called after it. Then he surveyed the damage. His camp was devastated. The fire pit was flooded, wood scattered everywhere. His fishing net was gone, probably washed downstream. Half his stored food was ruined. The carefully organized camp he'd built over 15 days was now chaos. Marcus stood there, cold and exhausted, looking at the mess for a moment, just a moment. He felt despair creeping in. 15 days to go. Could he rebuild all this? Then he noticed something. His shelter, the one he'd frantically reinforced during the storm, was still standing. Every cord line had held. Every lashing was intact. The framework had bent, but not broken. "Huh," Marcus said, a smile slowly spreading across his face. "Grandpa was right. Build it right, and it'll hold." In the council chambers, a message arrived, an offer to extract the human early, given the circumstance, survived the storm, which was more than most species could claim. The trial could be considered complete. The golden counselor looked at the feed showing Marcus standing in the ruins of his camp. "Send the offer." Its side a drone descended, projecting a holographic message. "Marcus Chun of Earth," it announced. "The Galactic Council acknowledges your impressive survival of the storm event. You have demonstrated adequate capability. You may activate your beacon now with honor. The trial will be considered successfully completed." Marcus listened, then looked directly at the drone. "How many days do I have left?" he asked. 15, the drone replied. "Then I'll see you in 15 days, Marcus said. "Unless you want to watch me rebuild." He turned his back on the drone and began gathering scattered supplies. The drone hovered uncertainly, then ascended back into the sky in the council chambers. Reactions varied. Some were impressed, others thought him foolish, but all were now watching with genuine interest. He refused extraction, the crystal inspire said, almost respectfully, after losing most of his progress. "He's either incredibly stubborn," another member said, "or incredibly confident. Perhaps both." The elderly tree being suggested Marcus spent day 18 rebuilding. His hands were a mess cuts. Rope burns, blisters on top of blisters. But they still worked. He relit his fire, which felt like greeting an old friend, salvaged what food he could, created new snares to replace those destroyed day 19. He noticed something interesting. The storm had exposed things, new rock formations, previously covered by debris, better water source, even some edible plants that the rain had brought to life. Every disaster brings opportunity, his grandfather used to say. If you're smart enough to see it, Marcus began exploring these new areas. He found better materials for his tools, located a cave entrance that would make an excellent secondary shelter day 20. He made significant improvements using lessons learned from the storm. He created a new shelter design. This one was even more sophisticated. The cord lashing patterns were more complex. Distributing tension more effectively, he also created a water collection system that would work even without rain, using condensation and careful placement. Day 21 brought a surprise. The apex predator appeared again. It didn't approach closely, but it watched Marcus from a distance. Marcus, remembering their shared night in the storm, decided to try something. He had extra meat from a recent hunt. He used cord to create a small net bag and placed meat inside. Then he left it on a rock between them and backed away. The creature approached, cautiously sniffed the offering, took it over the next few days. This became a pattern. Marcus would leave food, the creature would take it, always watching him with those intelligent eyes. They weren't friends, not exactly, but they weren't enemies either, forming relationships with the local fauna, a council observer noted. Unexpected or strategic, another replied, ensuring the apex predator doesn't hunt him. Day 23. Marcus created something that made the council sit up and take notice. Been thinking about efficiency. His fishing method worked, but it required constant attentions, so he designed a better net using the remainder of his paracord. He created a fishing trap. It was essentially a funnel made of woven cordfish. Could swim in easily, but couldn't find their way out. He placed it in the stream, waited carefully with rocks. Within hours, he had caught more fish than he could eat. That's genuine innovation, the Golden Counselor admitted. Not just survival. Marcus was starting to enjoy himself. The challenge had shifted from, can I survive, to what else can I build? Day 24. He created a primitive loom using cord and branches. He wanted better clothing. His original clothes were falling apart by weaving cord in tight patterns. He created a rough fabric. It wasn't comfortable, but it was warmer. Day 28 began with Marcus taking inventory. He sat outside his shelter, watching the sun rise over the alien landscape. That had become strangely familiar. The original 200 meters of paracord was now distributed across his camp in dozens of different applications: fire starting bow, fishing trap, shelter lashing, snares, his makeshift bridge, carrying straps, clothing repairs, tool attachments, and more. Maybe 20 meters remained unused. Built a functioning survival system from almost nothing, but Marcus wasn't satisfied with just surviving anymore. He was thinking bigger. If I were staying here permanently, he mused aloud. Knowing the drones could hear him, what would I need? The answer, a more permanent settlement. So He began his most ambitious project, yet using techniques he'd refined over nearly 30 days. He started expanding his shelter into something more substantially, created a frame using the strongest branches he could find. The lashing patterns were complex. Now he'd learned which knots held best, which angles distributed weight most effectively. The cord became the skeleton of a structure that was part tent, part cabin. He reinforced weak points with additional lashing, created a sloped roof that would shed rain and snow at it, a covered entrance that would block wind. Work took all day. By evening, he had created something that resembled actual architecture, not just survival civilization. The council chambers. The observers were having a debate. This isn't just surviving, the young observer who defended humans before said. This is thriving. He's turning a hostile environment into a home. Another agreed, but the crystalline spider remained skeptical. It's impressive. Yes, it admitted, but many species have survived this trial. Have they built permanent structures? The elderly tree, being asked, pointedly silenced. Day 29. Marcus woke with energy. 2 days had become his mental countdown. But he felt like he could stay 2 months. His body had adapted completely. The thin atmosphere didn't bother him anymore. The temperature swings felt normal. Even the food, strange as it was, seemed natural now. He decided to spend the day exploring further than he'd ever gone. There was a ridgeline he'd seen in the distance, and curiosity pulled at him. He packed supplies, water in a container woven from cord and bark, dried meat, fire-starting materials. His cord and bark backpack sat comfortably on his shoulders. The hike took hours. The terrain was rough, but Marcus navigated it easily. Now his homemade sandals protected his feet perfectly. Halfway up the ridge, he found something unexpected. Cave paintings. Not paintings. Carvings, ancient marks in the stone. Weathered but still visible, they showed figures, beings that might have lived here long ago. Some looked almost human, others were clearly alien, but they all showed the same thing: survival hunting scenes. Shelter building. Fire, the universal story of intelligent life learning to endure. Marcus traced the carvings with his fingers. We're all the same, aren't we? He said softly. No matter where we come from, we all had to learn to survive first. At the top of the ridge, the view was breathtaking. He could see for kilometers. The stream where he fished, the ravine he'd bridged, his shelter camp marked by smoke from his fire. He could see weather patterns forming in the distance. Could spot areas where prey animals probably gathered. Could identify resources he hadn't even known existed. Knowledge that's what these 30 days had really been about. Not just surviving, but learning, understanding the land, the patterns, the rhythms of this place. Marcus sat on the ridge as the sun began to set. Tomorrow was day 30. Tomorrow the trial would end, but a part of him didn't want to leave. There was something pure about this life. No politics, no bureaucracy, no complications. Just the simple challenge of existence and the satisfaction of meeting it. Grandpa, he said to the wind, I finally understand what you were trying to teach me. It's not about having the best gear or the most resources. It's about knowing that you can handle whatever comes. That confidence, that's the real survival tool. He made his way back to camp. As darkness fell, the stars here were different than Earth's, but they were beautiful in their own way. Day 30 arrived. Marcus woke before dawn. As he had every day, he went through his morning routine, rebuild the fire, check the fishing trap, survey the camp. Everything was automatic, now muscle memory born from repetition and necessity. Around mid-morning, the transport ship appeared in the sky. It descended slowly, landing in a clear area near his shelter. The door opened, and Ambassador Rodriguez stepped out, followed by several council members in environmental suits. Rodriguez looked stunned. Marcus, she breathed, taking in the camp. What have you done here? He looked around, trying to see it through her eyes. The sophisticated shelter with its cord infrastructure, fishing trap actively catching food, the snare lines, set up along game trails, the bridge spanning the ravine, the fire pit with its organized wood storage, the tools hanging from cord lines, the entire functioning survival system he'd built. Survived, he said simply. The Golden Counselor floated forward. Its glow bright in the morning sun. Marcus Chen, it intoned formally. You have completed the 30-day trial. The Galactic Council acknowledges your success. Marcus nodded. Thank you, he said. However, the counselor continued, we must admit surprise. When you chose rope as your single item, many of us considered it a death sentence. The crystalline spider stepped forward, its many legs clicking on the rocks. How? It asked bluntly. How did you do all this with just cord? Marcus picked up a section of unused paracord. Because this isn't just cord, he said. It's potential, he began demonstrating, his hands working automatically. It's a fire starter, a snare, a fishing line, a shelter frame, a weapon string, a carrying strap, a tool handle, medical suture, a bridge cable, a loom, a measuring device. He pulled the cord apart, showing the 7 inner strands, and each of these inner strands, they're tools too. Fine enough for delicate work, strong enough for fishing line, perfect for sewing. So I didn't bring one tool, Marcus continued. I brought dozens, or rather, I brought the material to make dozens. The tools were always here. He tapped his head. In the knowledge my grandfather taught me, the silver-scaled council member who had been so dismissive on day one approached. You have taught us something, it said, and there was respect in its voice now, about human adaptability, about seeing potential where others see limitation. Ambassador Rodriguez was grinning. So, she asked the council, does this mean humanity's application for Federation membership will be reconsidered? The Golden Counselor announced. But first, we have questions for Marcus Chen. They spent the next hour examining his camp. Marcus explained each innovation. Each technique. He showed them the fishing trap design, the shelter lashing patterns, the fire starting method. The council members took notes, asked questions, genuinely interested. This bridge, the elderly tree being said, examining the cord structure. Explain the engineering. Marcus walked them through it. Triangular supports for strength, proper tension distribution, flexibility to handle wind. But how did you know these principles? It asked. My grandfather taught me, Marcus replied. But really, humans have been doing this for thousands of years. We had to, he continued. Earth didn't give us natural weapons or armor or environmental adaptations, so we learned to make tools, and we got good at it. The crystalline spider was examining the shelter. These knots, it said. Each one is different. Each one has a purpose, Marcus explained. This one cinches under load. This one releases easily. This one distributes stress. It's not just tying cord randomly, it's applied physics. Where did humans learn this? Everywhere, Marcus said. Sailors, climbers, soldiers, builders, artists. Every human culture developed cord techniques. It's universal to our species. A young council observer spoke up. I had a question, it said hesitantly. Why did you stay after the storm? When we offered early extraction. Marcus thought about that, because I wasn't done, he said finally. The trial was 30 days. Not until it gets hard. Leaving early would have felt like quitting. And besides, he added with a smile, I was curious what else I could build. The Golden Counselor's glow seemed to pulse thoughtfully. This mindset, it said. This refusal to accept good enough, is this common among humans? Pretty common, Marcus replied. We're stubborn that way. We always want to see what's possible, even when we probably should quit. Rodriguez laughed. That's definitely us. She? Agreed. The council members conferred among themselves. In their various languages, finally. The Golden Counselor turned back to Marcus. We have a proposal, it said. an unusual one. The survival trial is traditionally 30 days. But given your success, we wonder if you would be willing to extend your stay. Marcus blinked in surprise. Extend it? Another 30 days, the counselor explained. To demonstrate more advanced survival techniques. Other species would observe and learn. It would be voluntary. Of course, Marcus looked around at his camp, at the shelter he'd built, the systems he'd created, the land he'd learned to read. Then he thought about Earth, about hot showers and soft beds and meals that didn't require hours of preparation. Can I think about it? He asked. Of course, the counselor said. We'll return in 1 hour for your answer. The council members retreated to their ship. Rodriguez stayed behind. You're actually considering it, aren't you? She asked. Marcus shrugged. A part of me wants to stay, he admitted. There's something pure about this. Something real. But the council chambers were filled to capacity. Representatives from 50 different species had gathered for the formal debriefing. Marcus stood at the center. Still wearing his weathered clothes from the moon, had refused to change, saying these clothes had earned their place here. The Golden Counselor began the proceedings. We are gathered to review the survival trial of Marcus Chun. Representing humanity, it announced. The trial lasted 30 days on classification K773. His chosen item was 200 meters of paracord. A holographic display activated, showing highlights from the 30 days. The council had edited together footage from the monitoring drones. Marcus watched himself struggling through that first freezing night, saw himself making fire for the first time. The triumph on his face, watched his hands working cord into snares, nets, lashings. The footage showed the storm, the desperate reinforcement of his shelter, the moment he shared space with the apex predator, building the bridge, creating the fishing trap, constructing the permanent shelter. When the footage ended, the chamber was silent. Finally, a council member Marcus hadn't met before spoke. It looked like a floating cloud of geometric crystals. Question, it said, its voice like wind chimes. At any point during those 30 days, did you consider activating the emergency beacon? Marcus thought honestly about that once, he admitted. During the first night, I was so cold I could barely think. My body was shaking so hard, I thought my teeth would break. I remember looking at my hand, knowing the beacon was right there. What stopped you? Another council member asked. Stubbornness, mostly, Marcus said with a slight smile. And my grandfather's voice in my head. He used to say, the cold is just information. It tells you that you need fire. So instead of giving up, I decided to make fire. Once I started solving problems, the idea of quitting just faded away. The crystalline spider, who had been so dismissive at the start, leaned forward. You have fundamentally changed our understanding of human capabilities, it said. We owe you an apology. When you chose Cord, many of us thought you were either ignorant or arrogant. Marcus shook his head. No apology needed, he said. You couldn't have known. How could you understand what Cord means to humans without knowing our history? Explain, the Golden Counselor requested. Marcus collected his thoughts. Humans evolved without natural weapons, he began. No claws, no fangs, no armor. We were weaker than most predators, slower than most prey. So we learned to make tools and cord rope. String, fiber was one of the first technologies we developed. Archaeological evidence shows humans making cord over 30,000 years ago. Maybe longer. He pulled out a piece of the paracord he'd kept. This represents thousands of generations of human knowledge, he said. How to twist fiber for strength, how to braid for flexibility, how to create knots that hold under impossible stress. Every human culture developed their own cord techniques. Egyptian rope makers, Chinese knotwork, Incan quipu, European sailing knots, Native American braiding. It's woven into our language. We talk about ties that bind, loose ends, being tied down. When I chose cord, I wasn't choosing one tool. I was choosing access to the entire history of human problem solving. The chamber absorbed this. The elderly tree being spoke next. But knowledge alone isn't enough. It said, you also needed the mental flexibility to apply it. True, Marcus agreed. My grandfather taught me something important. He said tools don't solve problems. Thinking solves problems. Tools just help you implement the solution. So when I looked at that cord, I didn't see rope. I saw fire starting capability. Structural support, trap components, fishing equipment, medical supplies. I saw potential. A young observer asked the next question. What was the hardest moment? Marcus didn't hesitate. The morning after the storm, he said. Seeing everything I'd built scattered and destroyed. For about 5 minutes, I just stood there thinking about how much work it would take to rebuild. How much easier it would be to just press the beacon. But then I realized something. The storm hadn't destroyed what mattered most. My knowledge was still there. My skills were still sharp, and I still had cord left. Everything else could be rebuilt. And the second time, I'd do it better. Ambassador Rodriguez stood from her seat. If I may, she said to the council, I'd like to add something. The Golden Counselor nodded permission. I've known Marcus for 3 years, Rodriguez said. He's smart, dedicated, good at his job. But honestly, I never thought he was anything special. I certainly never imagined he could do what we just watched. She looked at Marcus with something like, oh, what I learned from this trial isn't just that. Marcus is exceptional. It's that maybe all humans are. Exceptional. We just don't show it until we're challenged. Marcus's grandfather taught him survival skills. Yes, but millions of humans have similar knowledge camping. Hiking, military training, traditional skills passed down through families. We've spent our entire existence learning to survive with less, to see resources where others see nothing, to refuse to quit even when quitting makes sense. She turned back to the council. That's why you should admit humanity to the Federation, not because we're powerful or advanced, but because we're survivors. And we bring that perspective to everything we do. The council members began discussing among themselves. Their various forms of communication created a symphony of sounds and lights. Marcus waited patiently. Finally, the Golden Counselor spoke. We have deliberated, it announced, and we have reached several conclusions. First, Marcus Chun has not only passed the survival trial, but has exceeded all expectations. His performance has been exemplary. Applause or the various alien equivalents filled the chamber. Second, based on this demonstration, humanity's application for Federation membership is approved. Rodriguez gasped. Marcus felt his heart racing. However, the counselor continued, and the chamber quieted. We have an additional request, Marcus Chun. You mentioned creating a survival manual. We would like to commission this officially. But more than that, we would like you to establish a training program, teaching other species the principles you demonstrated. Marcus blinked in surprise. A training program? Indeed, the counselor said. Many of our member species have grown dependent on technology. They have forgotten or never learned how to survive with minimal resources. Your grandfather's knowledge, your human perspective, would be invaluable. The crystalline spider added, we would also like to request permission to study human survival techniques more broadly. Interview experts from your world. Document traditional knowledge. Create a comprehensive database of human problem-solving approaches. Marcus looked at Rodriguez, who was grinning. What do you think? He asked her. I think your grandfather's legacy just went galactic. She replied. Marcus turned back to the council. I'll do it, he said. On one condition. Name it. The Golden Counselor said. The knowledge has to be freely available to everyone, Marcus said. No restrictions. No classified access. If we're teaching survival, it should benefit everyone. The council members conferred briefly, agreed. The counselor announced more applause. A council member that looked like animated water spoke. Up, I have a question that may seem strange. It said, during the trial, you formed a relationship with the apex predator. That creature had killed previous trial participants. Yet you fed it, trusted it. Why? Marcus thought about those eyes in the storm. The silent understanding they'd reached. Because we were both just trying to survive, he said. Wasn't my enemy. It was just another living thing dealing with a harsh environment. Besides, my grandfather taught me something about predators. They don't hunt for sport. They hunt because they're hungry. If you can provide food easily, most predators will take that over a dangerous fight. It's practical, not personal. So you saw potential for cooperation rather than conflict. The water being observed. Exactly, Marcus said. That's a very human perspective. It noted the elderly tree being rose, or rather, extended its trunk-like body upward. Marcus Chan, it said in its gentle voice. You have reminded us of something important. We in the Federation have grown comfortable. Our technology provides everything we need. We've forgotten that intelligence emerged from necessity, that our ancestors survived without any of these conveniences. You've shown us that the most advanced tool isn't built in a factory. It's carried in the mind. The beings seemed to bow slightly. Thank you for that reminder. Marcus felt humbled. I just did what my grandfather taught me, he said. And that, the tree being replied, is precisely the point. Humans pass down survival knowledge through generations. You maintain these skills even when you don't need them. That's wisdom. The Golden Counselor brought the session to a close. We will reconvene in 1 week to formalize humanity's membership, it announced. Marcus Chun will work with our educational division to develop the train program, and we extend our welcome to humanity. May your species bring fresh perspective to our Federation. The chamber erupted in celebration. Representatives from dozens of species approached Marcus asking questions, offering congratulations, requesting to study with him. Ambassador Rodriguez pulled him aside at one point. You know this changes everything, right? She said. For Earth, for humanity's place in the galaxy. I know, Marcus said. Watching the celebration, because of rope, Rodriguez said, shaking her head in disbelief. Not because of rope, Marcus corrected gently. Because of what the rope represented.